The storm began quietly, as most political tempests do, behind closed doors, whispered in corridors where power trades hands like contraband. Kash Patel, the man who once operated in the shadows as a senior national security advisor, had resurfaced with a proposal so shrouded in secrecy that even seasoned insiders struggled to piece it together. He called it a Special Intelligence Acceleration Program, a phrase polished enough to pass for harmless bureaucratic jargon, yet loaded with the kind of implications that make the foundations of democracy tremble. According to Patel's pitch, the United States faced an imminent, undefined threat, a multi-layered foreign infiltration targeting everything from infrastructure to elections. His solution? A covert operational wing, reporting directly to a select few political figures, bypassing traditional oversight from Congress and the judiciary. Streamlined, he said. Efficient, he insisted. But the subtext was clear. Centralized intelligence power, concentrated in private political hands, hidden from the public eye. For Jasmine Crockett, the plan was not just alarming, it was radioactive. She had seen enough veiled policy maneuvers to recognize when national security was being used as a smokescreen. And this was not about defending the nation. This was about controlling it. Patel's allies painted him as a visionary, a man capable of outsmarting foreign adversaries. But in back rooms and among those who understood the machinery of power, whispers grew louder. This special program could surveil citizens, silence dissent, and reshape the political battlefield in ways unseen since the darkest chapters of American history. Crockett knew that if Patel's idea gained momentum, it would be nearly impossible to dismantle. The time to act was now, before the first classified memo was stamped and the machinery quietly roared to life under the cloak of patriotism. By the time Crockett confronted Patel in the hearing room, the atmosphere was already electric. Reporters crammed into every available space, their cameras trained on the long mahogany table where Patel sat, exuding calm confidence. He wore the expression of a man who believed his plan was already inevitable. "Mr. Patel," Crockett began, her tone surgical, "who exactly decides which Americans are considered potential threats under your proposal?" The question sliced through the room. Patel's eyes narrowed slightly, his lips curling into a faint smile that wasn't entirely pleasant. "The criteria," he said evenly, "would be determined by intelligence professionals in coordination with trusted national leaders." That phrase, trusted national leaders, landed like a grenade. Crockett knew exactly what it meant. Political gatekeepers handpicked by those in power, operating without public scrutiny. "So you're suggesting we bypass established checks and balances?" she pressed, "and give unelected individuals the authority to surveil, detain, and neutralize American citizens without a single court order?" Patel leaned back, unfazed. "When the house is on fire, you don't wait for a committee to approve the use of water." A few in the room chuckled. Crockett didn't. She had read the fine print of Patel's leaked draft. Under its language, national threat actors could include journalists publishing classified leaks, activists accused of spreading foreign-influenced narratives, or even lawmakers deemed compromised by outside forces. It was a net so wide it could snare anyone inconvenient to those in power. The more Patel spoke, the more it became clear this wasn't about defending the nation from foreign enemies. It was about building a machine capable of crushing domestic opposition under the guise of patriotism, and Crockett wasn't about to let that truth get buried beneath Patel's polished rhetoric. Crockett leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her voice rising just enough to cut through the murmurs in the crowd. "Mr. Patel, under your plan, who stops you, or anyone like you, from branding political opponents as threat actors just to silence them?" Patel's smile remained, but there was a flicker of irritation now. "With all due respect, Congresswoman, The only people who'd have to worry are those who put this country in danger. The implication was razor sharp. Crockett seized it instantly. And who decides what danger looks like? You? A handful of loyalists in a closed room? That's not security. That's tyranny with a flag wrapped around it. The audience reacted audibly, some gasping, others muttering. Patel didn't flinch. Tyranny, he said calmly, is doing nothing while enemies infiltrate our borders, our media, and even our Congress. The last word was deliberate, aimed like a spear. Crockett's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just policy for Patel. This was a personal crusade. She knew about his network of former intelligence operatives, his back-channel connections, and the private security firms quietly positioning themselves for massive contracts if his plan passed. So this is really about power, she said, her tone icy. You create a perpetual state of emergency, hand-pick the trusted gatekeepers, and suddenly, voila, you control the flow of information, dissent, and even the ballot box. Patel's jaw tightened, but he countered smoothly. Sometimes control is exactly what's needed to keep a nation alive. The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Crockett understood. If Patel's vision took hold, the definition of freedom in America would be rewritten, not by the people, but by the few who claimed to protect them. Crockett didn't blink. You talk about keeping a nation alive, but what you're describing sounds like putting it in a cage and calling it freedom. Patel tilted his head, as though studying an opponent he'd underestimated. A cage keeps the wolves out, Congresswoman. She shot back instantly. It also traps the people inside, turns them into prisoners of fear, and I think fear is exactly what you want. Patel's eyes narrowed just slightly. Fear is a tool. It wakes people up. It keeps them alert. And frankly, this country has been asleep for too long while enemies set up camp in our backyard. Crockett leaned forward, her voice dripping with accusation. Enemies or critics? Because from what I've read, your plan would give intelligence agencies and your private contacts free rein to label journalists, activists, even elected officials as threats if they speak against you. That's not national defense. That's political cleansing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patel's calm was starting to fracture, his responses sharper now. You think protecting America is a game? You think it's about coddling people's feelings while foreign operatives dismantle our institutions? She held his gaze. I think it's about knowing the difference between protecting the country and taking it hostage. And from where I'm sitting, you're not guarding the gates. You're building them higher and locking them from the inside. Patel smiled again, but this time it was thin and humorless. Sometimes a locked gate is the only thing that stands between a free people and their destruction. Crockett's reply was almost a whisper, but it carried like a gunshot. And sometimes that gate is the start of a dictatorship. The silence after her words felt electric, like the air just before a storm breaks. Patel leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, the faintest smirk returning to his face. Dictatorship? You think I'm trying to seize power? Congresswoman, I've spent my life defending this country, while you've spent yours defending people who want to tear it down. Crockett didn't flinch. Defending people's rights is not tearing the country down, but dismantling oversight, bypassing Congress, and funneling decision-making into the hands of a shadow network of intelligence insiders. That's exactly how power is seized. A flicker crossed Patel's eyes, the look of someone who's been caught a step ahead of where they wanted to be exposed. He straightened, his voice suddenly colder. You think you understand the stakes, but you've never had to order a strike knowing it could stop a terror attack or cost innocent lives. I have. I've made those calls, and I'll make them again if it means keeping America safe. Crockett's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Safe for whom? Safe for every American or safe for the people you decide are real Americans? The crowd reacted, some applauding, others jeering. Patel's hands tightened on the desk, his calm mask slipping further. Real Americans are the ones who stand with their country no matter what, he said sharply. And anyone who undermines that unity, whether they're waving a foreign flag or hiding behind the First Amendment, is part of the problem. Crockett's reply came like a thunderclap. The First Amendment isn't a shield for enemies, it's the foundation for freedom. Start chipping at that, and you're not saving America, you're rewriting it into something unrecognizable. Patel's jaw tightened as murmurs rippled through the audience. Crockett seized the moment, leaning forward with the precision of someone who had been waiting for this exact opening. You talk about protecting America, Kash, but let's talk about what you were really protecting during those so-called classified operations. Was it the American people, or the political futures of the people signing your paychecks? A low hum of gasps swept the room. Patel's gaze sharpened. That's a dangerous accusation, Congresswoman. She didn't back down. Dangerous? Number documented. Operations where intelligence was skewed to fit a narrative. Missions pushed through without proper oversight. Foreign assets placed in positions to influence American policy, and all of it buried under the label of national security. Patel shifted, his hand tapping the table in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You're painting patriotism as corruption. That's reckless, and it undermines the very people who keep you alive. Crockett's tone was like steel. What undermines them is using their sacrifice as a political weapon. You've blurred the line between defense and domination, Kash, and when you blur that line long enough, the truth disappears. His reply came low, almost a growl. The truth is, without people like me making the hard calls, you wouldn't even be standing here to lecture me. Crockett's eyes narrowed. And the truth is, without people like me holding people like you accountable, this country wouldn't be worth protecting. The tension was so thick the room felt smaller. Patel leaned forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. You think you're defending America, Jasmine? You're defending your version of it. A weaker, divided nation that folds the moment things get hard. Crockett's lips curved into a cold half-smile. And you're defending a version where one man's judgment overrides the will of the people. Patel's tone grew darker. Sometimes the people are wrong. Sometimes they don't see the threats until it's too late. That's why leaders make decisions. Real leaders, not grandstanders looking for camera time. Gasps erupted. The comment was a direct jab, and everyone knew it. Crockett shot back without hesitation. If your leadership means dragging this country into shadow wars and silencing dissent, then it's not leadership, it's dictatorship in camouflage. Patel didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned so close his words were almost a whisper, yet they carried through the chamber. Better a dictatorship than a country too scared to survive. The silence that followed was electric, every eye fixed on them, every mind racing to decide whether they'd just heard a warning or a confession.